So I think let's wait a few minutes. Please.
To get your point of view about, of course, present what we are exactly, because we want to show you a little bit of what we are doing and where we at the moment, but mostly what we wanted to achieve from the symposium is being able to talk to the people and get to know their points of views and opinions. What do you think should be EOSC about? Because it's one of the questions relevant to rules of participation. So, thank you for those who are closer. I can bring cookies if it makes you come closer.
Good. So
Let's start.
Let's start. I would say. So we have the rough agenda for today. Since we are a cozy community, we can be flexible with the agenda. We can try to work more on the things that you want us to discuss. So. Short introduction. We are 21 experts and 2 co-chairs. We have the board liaison in the person of Suzanne de Michel. And we have, usually our meetings are attended by the support, by members of the staff of the EOSC Association as well. We started working.
It doesn't matter, Raimundas, come on.
Okay,
it's the same for every task force. Go to the meet.
So we are the aims. That is the charter. So we are to ensure the bridge from the principles, and that is, I think, that what we are working on, to ensure the bridge from the principles into the inclusion criteria, and how this can be sort of outlined into something that that people can check against, not only declare that we support the principles, and define the monitoring and what can be reasonably monitored, suggest and propose the framework for the monitoring, and that's what we are doing here. Drawing the community involvement, discuss with the community. This work in the rules of participation was never meant to be done in the task force, and it has to be endorsed and adopted by the community. And also propose a durable structure after the end of the charter of the task force. So what are we working on? We are working on the architecture of the rules of participation that is based on the guiding principles of the high level of the current rules of current 8 principles of the rules of participation. And what is the purpose of the elaborated ROP is to produce the evaluation criteria and produce the evaluation framework and inclusion criteria for the entities and for the assets to be evaluated against, self-evaluated against, so that it is also scalable, to produce the monitoring framework that is also scalable to potentially a significant number of significant number of assets, a significant number of users and providers and in various actors in various roles that participate to EOSC. And in order to get there, to get to the scalability, to define remits and responsibilities, because it is not scalable to have fully centralized system of this inclusion criteria for everything. That would set the policy and set the inclusion criteria and also monitor that. That is, the EOSC is too vast to have that. So this is
just to summarize, because it's simply about being able to say who can join EOSC. If we want to set up rules to verify that, be able to monitor it, as Raimunda said. So we want to know who can join EOSC, what must be done about the joining, and do we want to monitor it? And if we do want to monitor it, how do we do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Why do you need to discuss this? Who should join EOSC? Is this not a question that has been answered by the way that EOSC has been set up? Is this not part of what EOSC is? I mean, I would expect that as part of the rules of participation, you start working at a later stage. This has been solved in the previous phases of the EOSC establishment, and also other task forces and working groups are dealing with this. Who are the actors in the EOSC ecosystem? I would expect that you take it from the outcomes of the other task forces and build upon this, providing the rules.
That's what the next slide is about. What does it mean to participate in EOSC? Because that's what we are working on, because to participate in EOSC, it's not black and white. You are not either participating or not participating. It is a range of levels that imposes their own requirements on the actors, and that that have a different entity, potentially different entities responsible for those requirements and for the resolution, for the monitoring and resolution of the conflict. So that's why we consider what scenarios are applicable and what inclusion criteria are applicable for what actors at what level of participation. So either I wrote it as a level of participation, but it could be set as a mode of participation, if you will, because it is a range. So one basic level of participation, more general level of participation, the first entry into EOSC, is that if the entity, organization, is findable, is there, is in the either in the users database, in any of the databases that create sort of EOSC ecosystem. It is findable there. So then we have the catalog providers, we have service providers, users, other actors that are defined in the various fora. But this is the basic level of requirements, right? Then the next level, yes, Ivan.
Well, if EOSC is something not usual market where there is a supply side and demand side, if EOSC is basically breaking this model because the user is the provider and the provider is the user. Researcher provides data, research uses data. Why did you follow this traditional model of supply and...
We are just distinguishing who are the actors, and please notice that the same organization can be a user and a provider.
Same actor can take on different roles.
Yeah, so it's about distinguishing which roles apply in the EOSC platform or in EOSC in general, but it doesn't mean that a single entity can have many roles at the same time, because in the process of...
I'm advocating that there is no entity that has just a single role.
Yeah, but in order to assume that role, that we are looking from the rules of participation perspective. In order to assume the role of the provider, you have to meet the requirements. You would not necessarily have to meet the requirements from day one. But if you are on a journey through EOSC, that is also something that you are not entering the EOSC with the in full capacity, with all roles, all your assets visible in the EOSC and so on. You may have to comply to additional requirements if you engage more, if you integrate more.
Is it okay? Is it understandable? Because we can go in circles. We did that at the beginning. We tried to be philosophical and understand who is the actor, what are the actors, what are the potential roles. But it's about being able to support the platform we are building, being pragmatic. There are certain questions that needs to be answered, and I think that the rules of participation should enable the platform to function along not even its principles, but its functions. So if we want to enable automatic execution framework for the users, if we want the users to be able to instantiate, or providers to automatically instantiate services for the users, we need to have tools to do that as a infrastructure. So these tools, we can partially we can develop them by ourselves, but those who are coming and using and creating the platform in the end, so the consumers and the suppliers, they need to provide that something, and I believe that that something needs to be somehow included in the rules of participation. Because if we won't ask people to do things that enable us to do our job, the job will not be done. Because if the providers would be able to come and not write anything else apart from the name of the resource, people will not be able to discover things. And of course, I'm not saying that it's the major rules of participation in EOSC, that it's enough for you to come and fill in the profile of the resource. No. But on some level, that's why we came up with the idea of the levels. At some level, if you want to participate in a function of EOSC, you need to align with the prerequisites needed for it to make happen.
Yeah, so this is a reflection of the discussion in the task force. So that the sort of how to address, because we have to provide a consistent document that would have some concrete criteria for the inclusion and for taking up the various level and various role. So if I am an organization, if I'm registered in the EOSC databases, if I'm registered in any of the thematic clusters, am I in EOSC or am I not in EOSC? That's the question that has to be defined here. What is the sort of basic level?
And there is also this important matter that sometimes in the end, we don't even need people to know about EOSC. But people will participate in EOSC functionalities and capabilities, and we need to know what they will be asked for in return in participating. For example, probably some of you know about, on a national infrastructure level, when you are giving your resources to the researchers, you are asking them to give a proper, not accomplishment, but how do you call it? You're asked to include the fact that you were using these resources. Sorry? Acknowledgement, thank you. Yes, so for example, you are asking for acknowledgement, and this is kind of rule of participation in the infrastructure. Because in other way around, you will not be able to report to the ministry about the use of resources. And that might be the reason for you for that. In our case, we believe, and this is a certain example, in our case, we believe that this kind of acknowledgement should also be rules of participation for the users, because this would be an incentive for the providers to join us. Because please notice, nobody will tell to join people. We need to be a business here. We need to make people want to come to us. And of course, I'm not saying we are creating the business, but in the end, the approach should be business-like. We need to be able to sell the idea somehow and make people come, know about the values we are ready to give to our potential actors. That's why we do distinguish providers and the users definitely, and catalog providers, because they will be thinking about something else and they will be asked about for something else as well.
Yeah, so list of the actors, potential actors and roles is not
that important.
Not complete in that sense. But I mean, we defined the 4 basic sort of building blocks of the participation, because we are talking about the architecture of the rules, right? So this is how we structure, how we want to structure, how we want to work from the high-level principles into the inclusion criteria. So this is the structure, and also one of the part of the architecture is the value for participation. How do we motivate the actors to go to EOSC? How do we motivate the providers who are already integrated with EOSC Core to integrate with the other services, to comply to the EOSC interoperability framework, or to some part of the EOSC interoperability framework?
To support other EOSC functionalities, right? To become a part of the new functionalities being developed.
To integrate, to evaluate themselves, and to dedicate an effort to actually modify their assets so they are integratable. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to give a point of view from a university that is just an observer in the EOSC Association and still wondering what it could do with EOSC. And the fact is that I have a hard time even explaining what it does. So I think that the main point here is also to have a clear view on what EOSC can bring, and a set of services that are actually operational and interesting, that adds value to the effort that is needed for the researchers, for the platform operators, for the support personnel to join.
But
yeah.
But that is more a question for Karel.
Yeah, this is a good opportunity to say something, because I have to go out for another meeting. Unfortunately, I will come back at the end, hopefully. But yeah, this is the basic question you're raising. It's basically similar to the question, what is EOSC? And EOSC is something more specific than the EOSC ecosystem. If you look at all the projects, some people tend to say EOSC Core is there because this is what EOSC Future has built. And then my question always is, how about all the other EOSC projects? Are they not part of EOSC, only EOSC Future? Is that the core? So in my view, we don't have EOSC yet. We don't have a minimum viable EOSC yet. We don't have a core yet. There's a lot of developments that point at that direction. There's a lot of useful things being developed in all the projects that could possibly contribute to the final thing we would call EOSC. Why do I make that distinction? For me, EOSC is a web of fair data and services in the end. Not only for me, for the board this is. We discussed this thoroughly. And this web should extend over the world ultimately. We cannot rule the world. We cannot rule the web. We cannot rule the web of fair data. But what we could do is make a clear European contribution, federating the infrastructures we have in Europe with respect to data resources, with respect to services that operate on these data resources, and through this clear European contribution, which we call then EOSC, we could also have others in the world contributing to our data, could others contribute to use our services, etc. So it is, as Raimunde said, not in or out. It's a spectrum, and yes, you could have people or organizations that are as well provider as user, of course, many of them. All the research performing organizations, I think, provide data and use data. But if you talk about rules of participation, you have to distinguish between the providing part and the using part of the data. So for me, EOSC ultimately will be the European contribution to this web of fair data and services, and we need rules of participation and a governing body to decide who is in this set or who is linked to this set and how intensive an organization is linked to this set, leaving alone the part that everybody can ultimately use the things that are open, and as much of it will be open as is possible. So it's not an easy task for the task force to be clear. If EOSC would be there, let's suppose EOSC would be a business, selling something clearly defined, this is what we sell, and now we're going to decide who can buy it under what conditions and who can contribute. That would be a much easier story. Now we have a huge spectrum of projects that have contributed to a development we call EOSC. While EOSC is not there, they did not and do not know exactly what they are contributing to. They all hope that what they are doing is useful. That's what they work for, of course. And then there has to be a certain point in time when we, and who is we, I don't even know, have to decide which of all these developments is going to be part of it. Let's take the EOSC, not the platform, but the portal. A lot of people consider, and also if you plug in Google EOSC, you get immediately the portal. A lot of people consider the EOSC portal as EOSC. What we as a board say, the EOSC portal is a possible, valuable set of services that could be part of EOSC. That's something else than saying it is EOSC. There was no rules of participation in the beginning. There was nobody that checked what came into the portal or not came into the portal. Everybody could enter. It was open for everybody. That is not the way we can operate a system and then be a reliable service provider for whatever. So there has to be some point in time where a body, and we're discussing with the Commission and with the countries what this body would be after 2027, where a body makes a decision on whether a certain service which is now on the portal will be part of EOSC or not. The portal is useful, the portal is the portal, but it's not EOSC, in my view. And unfortunately, I have to leave. That offers much more possibility for you to talk rather than me to talk.
Thank you. To add on the top of that, thinking about EOSC again as a business, I would say that now we don't have an offering for the universities. And what Carl, I'm just regretting that Carl is leaving, but for me, we have different business models right now going on and supporting EOSC. One of the business model we have are the European grant projects. This is the business model because we do in fact have the users or the consumers in the shape of communities themselves, which are starting to using and utilizing the EOSC resources as a participants of EOSC projects, because by the portal, by the platform, we are able to serve mostly the single users or the single users as the representatives. We are not able to facilitate bigger amounts of resources, but it's happening in the scope of the projects. So at some point of trying to understand what is going on in EOSC, we came to the conclusion that maybe the project funding, because the business is about the money. We have services for free, but they are not for free really. We have virtual access that someone is supporting, and we have some ideas about how to implement it and make use of it automatically via the mechanism of the portal. But we also have what's going on in the 07 projects. There are communities making use out of the infrastructures participating, and that's the use of EOSC resources. These are EOSC resources, just not in an automated manner. This is not we are now in the design phase of what EOSC is. We are trying to understand what it might become based on our experience already, and I agree with what Carl has said. What we have to do right now, we are trying to do two things. We try to develop the rules of participation that apply to the current environment we are living at, and try to come up with the answers that, for example, Luciano needs the most, because Luciano is the one dealing with the people onboarding or institutions onboarding to EOSC. But at the same time, we want to be ready for the future and try to suggest maybe this should be what EOSC is at some day, and if it is so, this should be the rules. Yeah.
Yeah. So
we have a comment or a question.
Where?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I think it's a very interesting discussion, and sorry for jumping in, but for me it's really useful to interrupt you and to understand. I don't quite agree with what Karel said. I find his approach, I agree with his general approach, but I wouldn't see things so pessimistic. That we don't have anything yet, and
this part I don't agree either, because we did the onboarding in the scope of the project who was eligible enough to
Not only this, there is a service description template. Not everything can go to the EOSC portal or to the marketplace currently. There has to be a minimum set of rules. These are rules that need to be met before onboarding. We did this, for example, with the EFOS Euro project. We do this for our region. Not everything that has been submitted to us has been submitted also to the EOSC marketplace. So this is already a set of rules that are in place, and I believe you have an extremely difficult job to do, because how do you deal with this, with the service description templates that are part of other task forces, but clearly impact what you have to do and the rules that you have to set?
So, you have mentioned very rightfully, and please see what Karel has said, projects. Right, the other part of the EOSC, and what happens when the project ends. Who adopted your rules? So that is, they were adopted on a technical level, but they set as a policy to the EOSC, and where. I will. What?
I want the power. I want the remote.
Yeah. So
go further.
So that's one of the things that we are trying to address in the architecture part. That is responsibilities. Who sets the rules of participation? And I think that you are rightfully mentioned. The also other projects have.
It's not projects, it's a collaboration between projects. The rules have not been set by our project, they have been set by the previous phase of the EOSC project through a process commonly agreed.
Yeah, so that's one. But it's also the matter of scalability. Would there be a central body that approves the rules? Would there be something that for all these levels that could be centrally responsible for all the requirements? We don't think so in the task force, actually. So we think that for the integration with the core and integration with the other services, there are actors, owners of those services, owners of the core services, and there is a scope of roles that is a gap here. That would be the scope of EOSC operator, who is now to some extent performed by the consortium of EOSC Future.
But please note that all the middle layer is about EOSC capabilities. Participating in these rectangles, it's about enabling or being a part of a given functionality that is usually towards the consumers.
So the fact is, inclusion criteria. Who sets the inclusion criteria? So for the organizations, and I think that we have to accumulate this inclusion criteria that is already operational in the onboarding, in the EOSC onboarding team, that were implemented in the other projects that are being set out by the other task forces. But the inclusion criteria, the ultimate responsibility for the inclusion criteria, the way we see it now, is EOSC Association. We, as a task force, report to EOSC Association and give our results to the community. But on the policy level, it's the role of EOSC Association to adopt and approve that. And these have to be in accordance with the current principles. We looked at the current principles of rules of participation, and as far as the high-level principles go, we in the task force did not find any particular item that we do not agree with.
Because they are so high level that they don't mean anything in the end for the operational part.
Yeah. So, yeah, we are trying to do, yes.
Hi, I think it's important, you're making references to the rules of participation, and I think we might need to step one or two steps back. The rules of participation does exist. It's a document that's been published on the web. It's been accepted by the European Commission. It's published on the Commission's website, but it's never been adopted by the EOSC Association. So strictly speaking, it doesn't have any formal validity because it's never been put into force. So the thinking is that there needs to be perhaps a revised rules of participation that would be adopted by the EOSC Association in a formal process. So to some extent, the work we're doing now is to try to identify whatever changes to the document might be needed to present and make it better, to solve any problems that people have identified, to incorporate any good work that has been done in various other projects or various other communities, and then to capture this in a consolidated view, which in turn can be consulted on across all the communities, across the governance of EOSC Association, so that it can in fact be adopted for implementation and application. So it is being informally, I'm pointing at Luciano as a guy from the EOSC portal onboarding team, but it's those guys and gals who are almost unofficially enforcing the rules of participation. So the challenge is to make it an official process, to make it a clear process, to make it an accountable process, to provide a governance for that process, and to make sure that there's somebody ultimately accountable for this, which I assume would be the EOSC Association and its own governance process. So my basic point is that this design is going towards, okay, how much of this do we need to reflect in a new rules of participation? How much of it exists today? How much of it is different from the way we're thinking today and is necessary? How much is useful, et cetera? So it is kind of a blank slate, but it's not a totally blank slate because we have lots of experience. So that's, I'm just positioning the conversation as opposed to offering any kind of new ideas.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
And now a proposition, Raimundas, because we really want the practical conversation to take place. Let's try to go with the theoretical. You can talk on the way.
Yeah, so here you are. What? Did you send in the slides?
I did. I put, this is about governance, isn't it?
No. So you want what? You want this?
No. I put it in our common slide deck. Ha. Ha ha ha. Not good. That's the one you sent me to. Where's my computer? Yeah, go.
Yeah.
Where's my computer?
Yeah. I mean, just to precise a couple of details. I mean, I've been onboarding services in the marketplace. I mean, not only from my institution, but also from the EOSC Synergy project, because I was the responsible of thematic services. So, yeah, I was going through, and I think that the experience on service onboarding is quite advanced. I mean, because it comes from a long story of experience. But I think that there are other resources that we should consider that are not like another criteria that we should add. I mean, for example, in the 9 thematic services that we have added to the portal, there's no possibility of interoperability among them. I mean, there's no way of sharing data among them. There are other dimensions that we should consider for have the full realization of the concept of EOS that could be added at this point. So I think that, there is a very valid work on the onboarding to the portal for services for sure. And yeah, I'm an IT guy and really appreciated this work. But I think that there are other dimensions that we should pay attention.
I had a question as a user. I could find on the marketplace a link to a piece of software written by my organization, and no one onboarded it. So actually, by looking into the engineers in the team, no one did anything, but it was cited by a paper on Zenodo that did put a link to our GitHub repository, meaning that we are not onboarded, but we are findable already, which is really good. But the question now is, how do we comply to rules? How do we claim ownership on that software that we wrote? How does it work now?
So the one item that is to be addressed by the rules of participation is the catalogs, because you were probably compliant to the open air guidelines for the what do you
harvested from Zenodo by open air.
Yeah. So does it mean that we went through a process without knowing?
Yes.
Yeah. Currently it is, because Zenodo is an EOSC repository that is EOSC data source, qualified EOSC data source. So if you upload.
It's more than that. We were not on Zenodo, but we were cited by a paper that was on Zenodo. And that citation got harvested by, I don't know how, and now our GitHub, but in an older version, is on the marketplace, and we would like to claim ownership on that and put the real version that has a link to Zenodo now. But that's a bit complicated. But we were really happy to find our software there. Like, it was like, oh yes, it's interesting for people, but how do we?
There are two more people like you who are not happy.
Oh, okay.
Possibly. So.
Yeah, but that is one thing to address in the rules of participation, is how it's what the requirements should be met by catalogs, and how, because currently catalogs, as long as the data source is EOSC, they assume that the EOSC compliant, all the resource from the data source is sort of onboarded.
Well, the requirement, if it's a data source, and Zenodo is a data source.
Yeah.
It exists in both EOSC catalog and in OpenAir, and it has been harvested. So all because it complies with OAI-BMH.
Yeah.
All of the things that exist inside of Zenodo are also listed in OpenAir. And when Zenodo was added to EOSC catalog, all of that stuff became visible in the EOSC catalog. So what is available, what is presented is, I think it's all Dublin core metadata is what is associated with all of those Zenodo records. So perhaps wherever it was originally deposited, you put 7 other metadata standards, I don't know, but none of that information is there. So the question is, there are 2 questions for the rules of participation. What obligations do you have as the owner, quote unquote, of this software asset that is now in the EOSC catalog? What are you being required to do? And our current understanding is that is nothing. You have no obligations. What are your rights? This also is not well defined, but what you're asking about is your right as the owner of a record in the EOSC catalog that appeared somehow. What is your right to modify it or even to remove it?
Or to update it, because it's an older version.
Yes, exactly. So those are very good questions. We need to address this question. So, but to some extent, it's a special case because it's a special case with many members. Most of the cases are people who've made explicit. They've elected, they've chosen to put their assets in the EOSC catalog, and as such, they are not implicitly, but explicitly asked to comply with the rules of participation for their particular role in EOSC. So our question here is, what are those rules? And how hard should they be, how easy should they be, etc.?
Aren't the rules already defined?
Say again?
Are the rules already defined? Some of them are.
If you look at services, onboarding services, it should be TRL 8, 9. So why do we need anything more if TRL is standard?
Okay, so let's go maybe to this one.
I can give you many examples.
And we will give you in a second.
Personal data.
Mark?
What is your privacy policy?
Mark, can we move to the discussion, because we will try to answer exactly that question. So only to start with, we wanted to remember about the principles that EOSC is about to support. So the rules of participation should should support those as well. Multi-stakeholderism, openness, fair, so trust and quality, federation of infrastructures, and machine actionable. And in the objectives, open science practices and skills are rewarded and taught, becoming the new normal. Standards, tools, and services allow researchers to find, access, reuse, and combine results. Sustainable and federated infrastructures enable open sharing of scientific results. Again, this objective, powered by a given functionalities of EOSC, need to be supported by people who create EOSC, so the providers and the users. We have come up, so when talking about, now I would like to ask any of you and every one of you to try to come up with what you believe should be the proper rules of participation for a provider. Imagine you're a provider of a given service, you want to join EOSC, and what do you think you could be asked for and under what conditions? Because as Raimundas and Mark has said, it's not only about asking about something, it's also about what will be given in return. If you give me, or if you comply with this rule, you will be given that functionality, or you will support that functionality, so something will happen. And we need that something as well. Quickly, for the resource providers and for the rest of the actors as well, there is always different context. So we, in the first approach, we want to talk about providers in general, but the rules will differ or will have different priority or emphasis on them, depending of what is the resource the provider is offering, where is the provider from, so what type of institution is regarding the structure of the provider, for whom is it important, the given rule of participation. Is it important for consumer, the core service, the operations, or research funding organizations, for example, because they are also actors in that scope? And which are the affected parts of EOSC, so which functionality needs that rule of participation in order to exist and be effective. The possible questions we already have at hand is, does the provider need to be a legal entity? And that's a very interesting example, because we are still thinking about that, but just yesterday, Christos from AAI Infrastructure told us that in the AAI task force, they have also been thinking about these musts, about the providers joining, the AAI infrastructure, and for them, the legal entity is a must. So it might be true that because from the AAI perspective, the legal entity is a must, you also need to be a legal entity to become a provider. Maybe not on this very first level of EOSC, but if you're not able to join the AAI, what you can do? You can be findable, and that's it. Maybe it's not that little, but again, one of the questions to discuss. And the second one, do we care and assess the provider's resource quality? So I will only repeat what I have said today on the last session, that in my opinion, the resource quality or the quality of provider is a must at the beginning, because if we want to attract people, we need to be of quality just for the people wanting to join us, because nobody will switch their ways of doing or try using our capabilities if we will not offer quality underneath. So only a quick view on the context of resources. We have different kinds of resources. We have services. We have research products. Among the research products, we have research publications, research data, research software, and other products. The interesting discussion might be, what does it mean to be a provider of a research product? Because, for example, OpenAir right now, with organization dealing with most of the research product, doesn't recognize providers of research products, only publishers. We don't have a provider because nobody is responsible for what is being shared and what is being offered via the catalog of research products. But that's a comment. The next context, types of providers that have been already distinguished and recognized within EOSC. Infrastructures, research infrastructures, higher education institutes, research institutes, archives and repositories, computing and data centers, publishers and journals, libraries and commercial providers, with a list of resources offered by a given type of provider. The list for the users is different, so we do recognize universities as possible providers. We don't have the universities on our list regarding the users because we don't have the use case and or business model to support universities right now with resource access or delivery. And the last but not least, the affected parts of EOSC platform. So again, we are building the platform in order to deliver value, to deliver functions. And for the AAI proxy to work, we need certain things from the provider when joining. For the service accounting to work, we are asking about certain data for the EOSC accounting, joint accounting to work and be able to discover by the EOSC user. For the help desk, the same, for the monitoring, for the order management, because you can easily use your own access management, request management, but you can always, for the sake of the user, instead of going back and forth from EOSC to community portal, let's say, if the user for some reason prefers only one, you can have a unified experience because you can exchange data with the EOSC central instance of order management, so the user uses only one entrance and is able to find all the information in the scope of access request or order, as we call it in EOSC Future right now. So that's it for the beginning of the discussion. I've created this public working document. Once you get the slides, if you only wish to put your thoughts in it, I would be very grateful, and Raymond does. And now maybe we can talk simply about what do you think is the rule of participation for the providers that you think of based on your experience. You can try to think both from the provider side and the consumer side, because if you are a consumer, you would expect some kind of quality, and what rule would give you the trust that the quality is met if the provider is aligned to what rule, which rule. So this kind of experiment. Who starts? Thank you. Just keep it going.
Sure, someone has to start, right? The problem I usually have with this is the issue of definition of quality, which means different things from different people, and if you're a provider, it means one thing, if you're a consumer, it means something different. Yes, exactly. Like if I look, I come from a university. I represent my country on the SB also, but I come from a university. And for researchers, the notion of quality is the stuff open for use? Is it peer-reviewed? Is it fresh? While if it is a commercial entity, the notion of quality might be how much money can I make out of it, right? So this is something I've been asking even on the SB board every now and then. What does quality mean, and how are we going to control it? The issue of licensing, does the issue of licensing fall on EOSC, or is EOSC going to simply be a platform that accepts everything and then says, well, that's up to you if you don't have the right form of licensing. And because that can be a form of quality also, right? That means the legality of the information. I think these are all things that really have got to be looked at very, very, very well, because we have a cyclic effect over here. EOSC is as good as what you put into it. The people who are going to be putting stuff into it might also be the people who are eventually going to be using it also. So you can't look at it as a business structure in a traditional sense. It's a business structure plus an academic one plus a platform plus what do you call it? Self-advertising exercise, self-perpetuating exercise. So I think that, I'm not going to go on because there's a lot that one can say here. The basic thing is, I've got many questions and it's still very unclear to me.
This is the same for us.
Yeah.
Many questions, much more than answers.
So, next.
Ideas for the rule of participation for the provider. Any kind of provider offering any kind of resource, we just need to know which one and what rule would apply from your standpoint.
Yes, I would like just to come back a little, rewind a little on what you said about universities. What remains to be done regarding the rules of participation for new universities? What expertise are you potentially lacking, or what elements are you waiting for?
What else? Can you repeat? Sorry.
Yes, I wondered why. What was that you were waiting for, or that you were missing currently, in terms of expertise or elements to include the universities? Because I'm surprised to see that universities are places where there's a lot of research units, equipments, platforms.
No, I see universities as a very strong type of the providers. I don't know the answer about the model to include universities right now as the consumers in a unified manner. But please note, university, not a researcher from a university. Uses university as an entity. I don't see this business model right now that could support that the university is coming to EOSC and telling, for our sake, for sake of all of our providers, we would like to have access to this service. We don't have this kind of model yet for the university. We have for a researcher from a university, but not for the university. The representative of a university comes and is asking for a set of resources to support all of the researchers from that university. Because we don't have the procedure for that. We don't know how it would work. So that's the...
That was the original plan for the exchange, wasn't it? To be a business-to-business platform. Exactly. Where you could sort of share resources and have additional resources, but it's less about the data, less about the service, it's more about the infrastructure. However, I would currently there is some thinking about who is the user. So, and if we don't talk about the individual users, so we talk about the organizations who could use the EOSC assets in EOSC. So, but currently it's more of the idea level rather than the concrete inclusion criteria, and that you have to do this and you have to do that. So,
if you come back a little on your presentation on the slide presenting all the different actors that can join, it was here. I guess that you could say that universities regroup actually more or less some of these elements. Yeah. So the granularity you have here helps construct an entity that encompasses a lot of these elements. So yeah, just a thought.
I can tell you right away because I know the story of this typology. We pinned universities entirely under higher education institutes. Maybe we were wrong to do that, but that was the idea here.
Okay.
So can I actually explore this university question a bit? Universities can play two roles. They can be a provider of many different kinds of things. Some of them are listed there. They can also be a consumer of some of the same kinds of things as an institution, as well as a collection of individual users who might want that. And I'm wondering, on the second point, in your university, is there a potential interest? When people, you said, I do not know how to explain what EOSC is, and therefore we cannot even have the second part of the conversation, which is whether we think it's interesting. But are there some things that you might be looking for, might hope that EOSC can provide you, that perhaps we're just not doing a good enough job to explain what is available, but you as an institution would be the user? So that's my first question to you. The second question is there value in, for example, the university becoming participating in EOSC as a collective user and saying something like, we as an institution have the following rules about how our researchers handle sensitive data. And all of our researchers, graduate students, professors, postdocs, etc., have signed an agreement that says, we agree to a certain code of conduct about the handling of sensitive data. That would be a very interesting aspect whereby the user would come into EOSC and say, not only am I some user person, random person, but I have this piece of paper from, I don't know what university you were with, I apologize. Which one?
Lorraine, Université de Lorraine in France.
Lorraine, okay. This could be quite useful to say, oh, this person has these credentials, and we perhaps might make certain information available to these users from Lorraine University because they come with this piece of paper.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether there's...
The answer to your second question is quite simple to state, less simple to actually implement, but whatever. We aim to have a data policy at the scale of the university encompassing the RGPD problem stuff, all the regulation regarding sensitive data in France, because we have specific regulation regarding data belonging to the industrial and security sector, and health data, of course, and so on. So we aim to have that policy available by sometime in the next 2 years. So yes, we think that we can do this, have a single voice to say that yes, the research units that that belong to our university are advised. We can't say they have to, because the French system is really complicated with multi-affiliation research units, but whatever. We can have that document that states that researchers should do this and that.
Gentlemen, I'm so sorry, but I need to keep us on track. So
yeah, okay,
after you finish, I just wanted to ask you, after you finish, to come with at least one rule that you think that should apply if your university was about to become a provider in EOSC. What do you think could be asked of you, and in addition, what should be for the sake of your researchers? After you finish.
What can be asked of my university?
Yeah, when you're joining EOSC, what would you imagine that will happen? What do you expect to fill in or be asked to be? For example, data management plan. Can we ask you that if you're becoming a provider, you should have a data management plan in place?
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah. Data management plans for the research projects that are in my university, as well as data management plans for the structures and the equipments, the infrastructures that belong to my university. That's what we're working on currently. We already pretty advanced on DMPs for projects. We are advancing slowly. We are going to advance on DMPs for infrastructures. Does that answer your question?
Some of them. Thank you.
I wanted to comment and link on to try to answer what rules do we need, and to link this also to my previous comment about the service description templates, and also to the very interesting finding. Your name? Emma. Mema? Okay. Sorry. I think that we can say that what seems to be missing are rules in relation to what we could say soft aspects, although I don't agree with this term. Again, a number of technical aspects have been defined through the TRLs or through the service description templates. So people that are interested in making their services available through EOSC, they comply to them. And there we have achieved a great degree of collaboration and of clarity, I would say. What is still missing is how do we address things as, for example, my resources on EOSC and I didn't know about this. So who is responsible for this? You are happy that you found your resource on EOSC, but some other may not would have been not happy. So, and this could lead in huge legal problems for EOSC or whoever is EOSC. So I would like to make an advertisement about our work on this occasion. I believe that we need tools that are machine actionable tools that try to solve these problems. The legal and ethics aspects and the IP aspects are of huge importance, and we need to answer them if we want to say that we support an open and fair science. And
can you be more precise? Which
the
aspects?
Legal and ethics aspects.
Yeah, I know, but which?
Yeah.
What should we state? That you should be responsible, or you should think about legal and ethic aspects when you're on board? Or do you...
Okay, I can invite you to follow the discussion after the break, where we will present our Rolect tool. It's a tool that we have developed within the NIFOS Europe project, and that breaks down the legal and ethics principles as they have been described in all the previous discussions of the ROP working group, and matches them against the legal frame that already exists, because there are rules and there is a legal frame, for example, posed by the European Commission or by national legislations. Or by code of conduct. All these things need to be taken into account, and if somebody wants to make a resource available through EOSC, EOSC must be sure that every resource that is on the marketplace complies to this, so that we avoid problems like this, that we have resources where the owner is not acknowledged, where the licenses are not clear, and if I want to reuse this resource, how can I reuse this? So the license compatibility is a huge issue, not only for the one who provides the resource, but also for me, who is accessing the web of fair data, and I believe that this resource is useful for my work, so how can I reuse this?
But
under which license and condition?
Is it about the lack of the information about the license? Is it what you are referring to right now? Or about the license that's used doesn't let you to reuse the...
No, I'm saying that there has been not a license clearance process in this. And every resource that is... will be made available through EOSC should have undergone this license clearance process. It should be clear for everybody under which conditions this resource is available, and if and how this resource can be reused.
Well,
and for this, I invite you to check our LCT.
Okay, I need to say I don't agree quietly with that, because we are asking about that. That's just providers not giving that information.
May I comment on this?
One comment on this, if I may.
Luciano was first.
The principle that says there is a principle, overall principle of openness. It says as open as possible, as closed as necessary, right? So what that means from the license point of view. License point of view is either license is specified, and then it's clear that this is, or if license is not specified, operationally, then we assume that it is then open access. Why? Okay, you as a provider have the obligation to specify the license. If you do not specify the license, we have the guiding principle, right? As open as possible. So you have the open access.
I'm saying there should be a rule. Then should be please specify the license, whether it is open or restricted or whatever. I'm not going into this type of discussion.
Okay.
I think this is very important, but this refers to resources different from services. For services, things are quite clear because we have service provider responsible for the resources, clearly onboarded before onboarding the resources. There is not a license issue for a service because the only important thing is the condition to use the service and so on and so forth. These things you are pointing out are, in my opinion, referred to the research products, software, documents, and whatever. And I'm not an expert of this, but the path which has been decided for onboarding this kind of resources into EOSC follows the open air guidelines. And so maybe this is already considered within these guidelines. Did you already check this? Because this is important. For Roxana, maybe you should know this on the open air part, on the resource product part.
We've checked that part, the guidance part. So there is a rule that any research product should apply a license supporting open science, open access. Whether there is an information on the license when you search through them, I don't know. I didn't check. But again, for the services, I think I know what you mean. And again, I would say that right now we are asking for that information, but not everybody is providing the usable information. So it's about the quality of data being provided. So again, if we put that into the rules of participation, maybe there will be bigger.
There was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go somewhere else, so make a couple of general comments and a question. So if people have things related to the current one, that might be best.
I might have one that is a following up on software. You were asking for rules on who can post things, and I think we really have something to think about in the case of open software, because they are also a piece of research, and we are missing something if they are not on EOSC. And so those kind of ideas should also be there when we think about who can post or who can onboard. And yeah, that's just a thing to think about when designing the rules on who can post something.
So you are talking about the possibility to onboard, because that was my question to you really also. Imagine what you could be asked for when you develop a piece of software at the university and you want to make it a part of EOSC. What rules should you comply with?
I guess having a CI or something like
having
that.
What?
Continuous integration, something that makes it a quality software.
All right. I will put it down.
How much of you are familiar with the Open Code initiative?
Not at all.
Well, there are, much before EOSC, there is Open Code initiative using GitHubs. And I don't know, why do you mix these two? Why EOSC should worry about programming code or open? Because there is much mature initiative in the world that is currently going. A few weeks ago, I visited the Open Code.Germany initiative, and on national scale, there are many of these, and there is OpenCode.eu, which is dealing with the open code software.
Yeah, so in order to be there, I think that couple last comments. I didn't. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, maybe I'm from Canada, so I'm the odd person in the room, and looking at what EOSC is doing, both for how we can both participate in as a provider, for example, but also as a user, and how we can emulate what EOSC is doing in the Canadian context. So just listening to you, and I must say you're doing a very good job of pulling out the rules from the conversation. As a university, I'm interested in your question about higher education institutions or universities and how they can be both consumers and providers. And one of the chief value propositions I think EOSC provides to universities is an overarching or a single source for information about how their research community in that university is using the various providers and services that are registered in EOSC. Because sometimes as a university, there's a great deal of value in getting information from one source rather than the 200 providers that are part of EOSC. So in that context, I would say universities could be a user of administrative data within the EOSC framework. So
can you please, sorry, precise, because I'm not sure if I understand correctly about which part is interesting for the universities, the catalog part?
No,
accounting, all right.
The use. So for example, if in future you had a business model where universities would pay a fee as a member of EOSC somewhere down the road, then it would be useful for me to know which of the services my researchers are using, what's the level of use, are there licenses involved, do I already have a license to a particular service within the EOSC framework, and does EOSC provide me with an opportunity to simplify the fees I pay to the different providers by paying a single fee through EOSC? So I think EOSC provides universities an opportunity to ease the administrative burden of providing, paying for, providing access to these different research services to their researchers. So that's one comment. Yeah, I think that was just the value of EOSC to institutions that pay on behalf of their researchers for access to services is a big one. And of course, in your AAI context, a lot of universities are identity providers. So they're confirming and authenticating their users through the AAI framework. Okay. So there's a natural kind of connection in to EOSC through that AAI.
This is tricky, where to pin it under, to be honest, the AAI connection. If it's under the user or the provider also. But I will write it down. Yeah, I know.
Let's not go down that road because we have only limited time. So a few more comments, please. We were waiting for.
Yes, I have a question. So, my name is Arnold from Netherlands on behalf of SURF, National Infrastructure Provider. I actually had two hats. I'm a research software engineer, so understand the concerns here regarding software quality, but then also on the side of the DevOps, so operations. So one question is from the hat, when I change my hat now as a service provider, what framework is adapted? So, like lightweight service management. So when we talk about terminology, let's make that clear which framework we are using here. So I don't think anyone wants to adapt here ETL or anything like this. But things like FitSM, for instance, so EGI is here, maybe not in this room, but
then we are not dealing with the software. Then we are not dealing with the piece of software, but with a service.
Exactly. So in order to deploy the software as a service, it needs to comply with quality. For that, there are some rules. Obviously, you can already adapt fair software principles, which has been pioneered by Software Sustainability Institute and eScience Center in the Netherlands. You can comply. We have a compliance package where actually it's checked whether your software has a license, so it goes back to the dependencies of all the software you are using for your software libraries and checks the compliance. Second, it will give you a badge in GitHub whether you are fair or not, meaning you have a license, that's first one. You have README, your software is cited, meaning there is a citation, so there is a integration between GitHub and Zenodo, so you can get a DOI for your software. That's another one. A third one, okay, continuous integration, unit test, and name it. You can come up with the list, but there are already things that we can follow.
So but how you measure then? How you check if it's
it's automated. I can give you the link. You can actually. We adapted this in the Netherlands for every project we did. We worked on 70+ projects with many organizations, universities, institutes. Every software we ever produced has a DOI and has been verified by automated methods. First we did a checklist, like a stupid way of doing it. Is there a README? Yes, we checked, okay. But now it's automated. So that's the first part for the software. But for the service providers, it's a different story because basically software is not a service. So you need to deploy that. It's much more work. It's actually, you need hardware, you need to make sure you have security in place. Admins won't, install the stuff for you if you use some Java version that has Log4j, let's say, problem with your security and things like that. So, we need to have rules. So that question is actually which rules we are going to adapt. So there is ETL, which is like, books, 5 books with thousands of pages, or we are adapting FitSM, which is actually pioneered by EGI. And it's actually a very nice, lightweight way to actually think about this because it's also working with a centralized versus federated way. So the question is, which approach we adapt here? I guess it's federated. So there is no other option than FitSM, actually.
Well, we are developing, I have only a comment, we are developing the SMS based on FitSM standard for EOSC core services. But if we should...
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Hi, Klaus.
Thank you for the comment.
So I'm working in Shock Marketplace, and therefore I can represent the perspective kind of catalog provider. And I mean, first of all, I think it's also different for me to differ between the services perspective, because there you in control, you define the rules. But when it comes to the research products, it's quite complicated, and it's kind of opening Pandora's box, I think, especially when it comes to be compared with other catalog providers like OpenAir. And I think in this perspective, questions that arise are some like, who is the authoritative source then? So if there is an entry coming from OpenAir, and one coming from Shock Marketplace, who is the one who will be preferred?
The authoritative source would be the Shock because it's the provider of the information. But what we try also to do and not to forget about is that, again, we want to create a market. So on one hand, we want the users to verify the quality of what is being offered through EOSC. But on the other hand, we need to have some minimum level so we don't...
I mean, the difference between OpenAir and Shock Marketplace is in OpenAir is kind of black box. Yeah? You can't edit it. In Shock Marketplace, users can edit their entries. They can update their...
Users can edit their... But it's a matter of functionality, It's if you come and say, hey, we think that from the user perspective, this functionality is cool, this can be implemented. So it's a matter of a feature for the user.
Yeah, it would be kind of rule. So I would ask if I'm able to change the data at EOSC part of a search. Do I get information if this entry has somehow changed? Who will be, will my entry be prioritized against the one of EOSC, against the one of OpenAir? Such kind of questions could arise. So I represent in a way the users of my platform, and it would be interesting to hear and to get a clear picture of what is the prioritizing of my service in this bigger picture of EOSC.
Another point, if I may. I was surprised when you said you didn't have a business case for universities. Over here. Because I think the business case for universities is rather obvious, and it's been there for many years. Take anything, take e-learning platforms, take the research platform, which usually happens. The universities or organizations, not only universities, look at what's happening, talk to their own people, ascertain what the criteria are, see what best practice is, and then they come to a conclusion over time that this is the platform that they need, this is the service that they need, and then they go and get the service as a standard for the organization. So I suppose one thing that one can ask is, once the university organization has satisfied the rules of engagement, the rules of participation of EOSC, then all you have to ask from the individuals of the organization is, have you signed the rules of participation with your organization, which then automatically makes you eligible for the rules of participation over there also. So I think the business case over here is something that one can, get a lot of information from.
But now you are talking about, if I understand you correctly, about something slightly different. It's like a group onboarding of the users, which are the researchers from a university, right?
Not only the users, remember, the university is going to contribute and use. Possibly.
All right. Oh, okay. Got it. And regarding that use case, it's not that we didn't think of it. We just didn't implement it.
You didn't implement, but because it seemed to me as quite obvious. It's there. It's in your face.
Well, every use case takes time, and for the use case to be implemented, you need people to engage.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yep. So in that sense, I think that EOSC is not there actually recreating the organizational structure of the real world, to be honest, because the individual users are seldom come as individuals. They come as part of the organizations which they have the agreements with and which they have they belong to, and they may have the agreement, for example, for the processing of the private data, personal data, and that would open the data sets that would make the available data sets that contain the personal data to them, because the university has the procedures and the organization provides the procedures for processing the personal data. That is one of the items. But yes, Luciano.
Yeah, concerning the onboarding of users, currently there is no onboarding at all for users because they can simply connect to the marketplace, look for services they need or for other resource types, but there is no need to be onboarded. So what is, in my opinion, interesting from the discussion we had so far, which concerns the rules of participation for users, is the thing concerning the acknowledgement. Probably what we should take note of is the need for users using services got through the EOS portal and the other tools we have here, we are implementing, to acknowledge not only the service provided, but also the EOSC in general, which provide the tools to find, discover, and access the services.
Yep. So, as far as I know, we are 1 minute into the lunch.
I know, but a quick answer here. You are right, Luciano, but when we come back to the assumption that we need some actors to comply with different rules in order for the platform to work, I wouldn't say that there is no onboarding rules or rules of participation for the users, because the onboarding of the user is the registration. It's using the AAI for the first time and giving your information. Some of the information, if you give them, you might be a member of a given function.
Yeah, I would say at the rules of participation level, neglecting the onboarding part because it is different for the different types of actors. And so the rules are general principles which can be translated into inclusion criteria, which are then used for the onboarding of the different types.
So we will not resolve this problem today, and we will be happy to discuss that until the evening, so that clearly even if the audience is not if the auditorium is not very full, but it shows that the rules of participation is important for the audience. And we could continue that discussion and then formulate more requirements to the various actors. But really, we are quite into the lunch, and we may want to continue. So thank you all for attending this session. I would like to wrap up and close. So the next step will be more discussion inside the group and within the EOSC association on the rules of participation. But essentially, at the end of the winter, we foresee that the document will be available for the discussion in the wider community, so that you can look into it and you can comment and you can provide your inputs. Now, unfortunately, we may want to organize the interactive virtual info shares, but until the next symposium, it is. I don't know if there will be an event to gather all this wider participation of the different organizations to discuss this. So the discussion will continue online, and the result of our work will be available for discussion for the wider consensus and adoption within the community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for participating a lot.